the private jet that changed diplomatic history. It was not the largest aircraft ever built. It did not carry a nation's flag, yet its arrival quietly rewrote the rules of power. No cameras followed it. No press releases announced it. But every landing altered conversations that reshaped regions. Power once traveled slowly. Presidents waited. Treaties stalled. Distance created delay. Today, distance has collapsed. And among the sheiks, one aircraft accelerated history itself. To understand why this jet mattered, we need context. Diplomacy used to be formal, public, and predictable. Summits were scheduled months in advance. Outcomes were debated before decisions were made. But the modern world does not wait. Crises emerge overnight. Markets react instantly. Alliances shift before statements are drafted. Speed became leverage. The sheiks understood this earlier than most. They realized influence was no longer about titles. It was about arrival timing. This jet was not designed for comfort alone. It was designed for immediacy, for conversations that could not be delayed, for decisions that could not be leaked. Unlike commercial diplomacy, this aircraft erased friction. No security bottlenecks, no public itineraries, no intermediaries. When it landed, negotiations began immediately. At first, it seemed like excess, another symbol of luxury aviation. But patterns emerged. Deals finalized hours after landing. Disputes softened without explanation. Positions shifted before announcements were made. This jet was not transportation. It was compression. Time collapsed inside it. Distance lost relevance. Delay disappeared. And slowly, quietly, diplomatic gravity shifted. But few noticed, because the most powerful changes rarely arrive with spectacle. They arrive ahead of everyone else. What made this jet different was not speed alone. It was control over sequence. Traditional diplomacy moves in stages. Announcements, preparations, optics, then outcomes. Each step creates exposure. Each delay creates interference. This aircraft removed stages entirely. When a situation shifted, departure followed immediately. No committees, no scheduling negotiations, no public anticipation. Arrival itself became the message. The cabin was designed as a decision environment, not a place to rest, but to resolve. Secure communication replaced luxury spectacle. Conversations continued uninterrupted across continents, while others waited for clearance. Decisions were already forming at altitude. This altered the psychology of negotiation. When one side arrives instantly, the other feels late before speaking. Urgency tilts leverage. Timing reframes authority. Governments began noticing outcomes without context. Positions softened without explanation. Deadlocks dissolved quietly. The jet created asymmetry. It allowed conversations to happen before narratives hardened, before advisors aligned, before resistance organized. This was not coercion. It was initiative. By arriving first, the sheiks defined the frame of discussion. They did not respond to crises. They arrived ahead of them. The jet also erased visibility. No press pools, no arrival footage, no symbolic handshakes. Diplomacy returned to private rooms. And in those rooms, speed mattered more than symbolism. However, compression carries risk. When decisions move faster than institutions, accountability struggles to keep pace. Influence concentrates quietly. Oversight arrives too late. The jet accelerated outcomes, but also amplified consequences. Each flight carried weight beyond passengers. Markets adjusted. Alliances recalibrated. Expectations shifted. This aircraft was no longer a tool. It was a variable in global equations. And once power learns to move this fast, the world must either adapt or remain permanently behind. As the jet reshaped tempo, resistance began forming quietly. Institutions noticed decisions arriving fully formed. Diplomatic channels felt bypassed. Traditional influence lost relevance. Speed had become disruptive. Some governments attempted to slow engagement. They insisted on protocol, on process, on visibility. But protocol could not compete with immediacy. By the time formal meetings were scheduled, Outcomes had already shifted. Positions were softened privately. Leverage had moved. This created unease, because power that moves faster than systems forces systems to react blindly. Inside diplomatic circles, a new tension emerged. Who was actually in control? The office or the arrival? The jet exposed an uncomfortable truth. Influence no longer belonged to institutions alone. It belonged to those who could appear instantly, without explanation. This changed behavior. Some leaders began waiting. Others rushed to secure access. Calendars became flexible. Certainty dissolved. The jet had turned time into a weapon. But speed alone does not sustain power. Eventually, acceleration meets friction. Fatigue emerged. Decisions made quickly carried unintended consequences. Misalignment surfaced after outcomes locked in. Critics questioned legitimacy. They asked who consulted, who approved, who benefited. The very advantage that created dominance now attracted scrutiny, because influence without process invites suspicion. Inside the chic circles, recalibration began. Speed would remain essential, but unpredictability needed balance. The jet could not be everywhere, and if it became expected, it would lose its shock. So the strategy evolved. The jet stopped arriving constantly. Its appearances became selective, rare, and rarity restored its power. Because when arrival is not guaranteed, every landing becomes significant. The jet no longer chased crises. Crises waited for the jet, and that inversion changed diplomacy permanently. The climax was not a confrontation. It was a realization. The world did not lose control overnight. It slowly noticed it no longer set the pace. When the jet appeared less often, its absence spoke louder than its arrival. Leaders adjusted behavior preemptively. Decisions were softened in advance. That was a shift. Speed was no longer reactive. It became anticipatory. The jet had rewritten expectations. Diplomacy stopped asking when meetings would happen. It started asking whether they would happen at all. This was the revelation. Power was no longer tied to territory, or institutions, or even authority. It was tied to mobility, the ability to appear where gravity mattered most, before narratives formed, before resistance aligned, before outcomes became fixed. Luxury, in this context, was not comfort, it was optionality. To move instantly, or not at all, to engage selectively, to remain unreachable without explanation. The jet proved something profound, that influence accelerates fastest. When it ignores the clock, others follow. The resolution is not about aviation. It is about structure. The world still runs on schedules, but power runs on timing. Those who control arrival control conversation. Those who control conversation shape outcomes. And once outcomes shift, history follows quietly. This is why this jet mattered. Not because it flew faster, but because it taught power how to arrive ahead of consequence. And today, that lesson is everywhere. In markets, in politics, in decisions made before anyone notices. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. The